I am not a perfect analyst in this conflict by any means, but sometimes I really do earn my keep here on YouTube, and today is one of those days. The Biden administration has come out and revealed that weeks ago they gave Ukraine permission to strike Russian territory. And you might recall from 2 weeks ago, I was the one who noticed that the rhetoric around this had changed. Let's talk about what this means for the war and why Ukraine is doing it now. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is the big story here. This is exclusive to Politico. Politico seems to be fairly well connected here, having scooped a number of major stories. And it says that an unspecified time ago, sometime after Russia's Kharkiv push, but before today, the Biden administration secretly gave Ukraine permission to strike inside Russia, solely in the area near Kharkiv, using U.S.-provided weapons. This is according to 3 U.S. officials and 2 other people familiar with the move, probably Ukrainian officials. This was told to Politico Thursday, and the exact quote, the president recently directed his team to ensure that Ukraine is able to use U.S. weapons for counterfire purposes in Kharkiv so Ukraine can hit back at Russian forces hitting them or preparing to hit them, according to one U.S. official. He said the policy of not allowing long-range strikes inside Russia, quote, has not changed. This is really interesting. Right? Of course, Ukraine asked for the policy after Russia's Kharkiv offensive began this month. And this was an anonymity. These folks were granted anonymity for discussing it. Now, when do I think this happened? I think it's pretty obvious, right? When we look here, here is Russia's little Kharkiv offensive. And let's walk back in time. Join me. You can see that basically here we are 10 days ago, no movements in the front lines. And then you've got a substantial movement here. So here's the 8th. You have the 9th as Russian forces, and the 10th as Russian forces begin to contest the region. Then you have the 11th as they begin to seize a number of border towns. You have the 13th as some level of Ukrainian counterattacks begin. You have the 16th, 18th, 19th as Russian forces continue their offensive actions. And then you have kind of the 20th, and here's the 21st, right? So you could see around the 20th, Russian advances basically are fixed. They do not make any more substantive advances after about the 21st. And you can see they've been basically locked in these positions since then. What I find interesting about this, there's a number of things that are very interesting, but that to me, the 21st seems like probably, honestly, around the 14th would be my guess, because there's generally a reporting delay of about 48 to 72 hours here. And when it comes to disrupting logistics and supplies, there's kind of a what do they call a flash to bang, right? By the time you hit them, it takes several days for the effects to sort of be felt. Now, why did I gloat at the beginning of this video? Well, the reason is because you might remember about 2 weeks ago, I covered a strange phrasing from a U.S. official in a quote that they gave to Politico that then got reported through the Institute for the Study of War. And I found that quote. This is an article from the 14th of May. And Politico asked 2 U.S. officials who asked for comment. They confirmed that the Biden administration's policy has not changed. But the actual quote is very different than what we've heard from U.S. officials in the past, or had heard from U.S. officials up until that point. They said, quote, the assistance is for the defense and not for offensive operations in Russian territory. This is a strange phrasing because, one, political officials, especially at the White House, they are really good at phrasing things a specific way. And I can tell you, having worked at very high levels in the Department of Homeland Security for a number of years, that the exact phrasing of things like this are very carefully thought about, right? So what does this statement imply, right? What sort of things does this statement remain permissive, right? You notice that this statement technically would permit defensive operations in Russian territory, right? So because again, what would a defensive operation in Russian territory look like? Well, it would look exactly like what this policy it turns out was counter battery fire, disruption of local attacks within the Kharkiv region, right? Ensuring Ukraine is able to use U.S. weapons for counter-fire purposes in Kharkiv so Ukraine can hit back at Russian forces hitting them or preparing to hit them. So exactly what the Ukrainian forces needed. They needed the ability to strike into Russian territory to disrupt tactical movements, right? Gathering points of troops, what are called assembly areas, hitting depots and other major logistics hubs, hitting rail lines and roads and other points of transit, moving supplies into Ukraine. All of these things are defensive operations that involve disrupting the enemy's supply and logistics chains through this like defense in depth type of effort. So, all that to say that you can infer that something did shift within White House policymaking. Again, as of around the 13th, which again tracks about with what we've seen here. Because you could see here we have the 13th, right? Likely when the U.S. gave the authorization. And some of it is a little late, right? A lot of troops and logistics were into Ukraine at this point. And you can see that while the Russian forces sort of got locked in at Hyoboka and Lukyantsy, they continue to advance somewhat into Vovchansk, securing areas that were, I mean, note here that these are not like stunning advances, right? Because you could see here's the Ukrainian contested line. You could see the actual Ukrainian contested line does not really vary that much. Both sides sort of consolidate their gains and remain locked into place here. Particularly, we know that Ukrainians under Syrskyi have been more prone to using terrain to their advantage. So it would make sense that the Ukrainians would say, hey, listen, let's stay south of the Vovcha and south of the Donetsk and use that as our kind of defensive line, which has proven quite effective. So, again, I'm not out here to gloat, but I am out here to say that, I called it. But you guys should also gloat too. And here's why. Because you notice where the Russians haven't been very much. They haven't been doing very much in Vovchansk for like a week. And you guys may not know this, but you have actually helped do that. Because last week, we did a fundraising campaign. I partnered with Ukraine Aid Ops, a 501c3 charity registered here in the United States, so completely, fully legitimate and tax deductible, who partner with specific Ukrainian units to give them badly needed supplies. And we did a partnership with Lyut, which is a Ukrainian military police brigade. I was a military police soldier in Afghanistan, and so I obviously have a real affinity for military police units. And the fact is that, like the U.S. Army's military police in the counterinsurgency, the Ukrainian command is finding that when you need a job done, your military police units are your Swiss Army knife. There's no job that they can't handle. And Lyut was sent right around this time, actually, right around the 21st, 22nd. I'll have to check my phone. They text me updates occasionally. But they actually were deployed to Vovchansk right around the time that the Russians lost the ability to advance. And you guys helped get them jammers, thermal drones, thermal blankets to help conceal their positions against Russian thermal optics, a bunch of things that were badly needed. And they still have a lot of needs. So let's see if I can find it here. I'm going to link in the description, right? The fundraiser is still going on. If you want to continue to help these guys out, you can see we've got $12,000 raised. But again, the need is pretty great. Again, the number one thing is jammers and analyzers. These jammers are going to allow them to jam the signal of Russian FPV drones. Analyzers are going to allow them to detect the signals and frequencies that those drones are operating on. They'll also get them some anti-thermal coats, right? Night vision, thermal night vision, power stations, and generators. So all stuff, and you notice it's all non-lethal aid, and that's because, again, they're a 501c3, and you definitely can't go buying foreign military's weapons with 501c3s. But again, we are on the up and up. That's why I like partnering with them. Plus, if you donate, $500 or $1,000, right, you could score some sweet patches. And if you really contribute $2,000, you can even get the signed flag from the regimental commander. So that's pretty dope. So check it out. Links in the description. And again, a huge thank you to all the Colonel tier members at combatvetnews.com, all the Lieutenant tier members. You guys are out here supporting me, and I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.